Savannah was born out of Mayor Johnson's Housing Task Force's action plan, and we exist to rally our community around the need for more affordable housing throughout Chatham County. Our mission is to grow community resources to preserve and create housing that is affordable for everyone. We work to collaborate, educate, advocate, and fundraise for the Savannah Affordable Housing Fund. We believe that everyone deserves a safe, stable, healthy, and affordable place to call home. No matter your income, no matter where you're from, no matter what part of town you live in or the county, where you work or what you do, we all need a home that we can afford without spending more than 30% of our household income. We all deserve a thriving and vibrant community. You might notice on your table that there is a game that we are sharing, and I wanted to invite Clinton Edminster up for just a brief moment to explain how this came about.
No. But I do, Lauren Lane asked me to come up with this, to sort of gamify the complications that you might run into if you were trying to develop some housing. So after quite a few bottles of red wine, I came up with what I've called red tape. And I think there's going to be some point, maybe during lunch, to play it, but check it out. If it's frustrating, that's the point. If it doesn't make any sense, that's the point. And if you lose, that's your fault. That's not mine. The game is perfect. That's all I got to say. All right, thank you, and great audience. Well done.
For nearly everyone, our relationship with housing is both deeply personal and intensely local. Housing is complex and nuanced. The stakes are very high, and most people are inherently risk-averse, so the task of addressing our housing crisis is understandably difficult, and as humans, we want guarantees. But as most people in this room understand, there is no one solution, and there are no guarantees. So as we get started with our program today, I want to kick us off by saying very plainly, we are here to work collaboratively. This effort is about looking forward to the community that we want to be and working hard together to get there. We are not interested in looking backward or casting blame. We are here to be innovative, but also realistic. Our community is growing, changing, and evolving, and our housing policies and initiatives need to grow, change, and evolve too, to ensure that we have the thriving and vibrant community we all want and deserve. Now it is my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Mayor Van R. Johnson, the 67th Mayor of the City of Savannah, to officially welcome you to There's No Place Like Home, our Attainable Housing Stakeholders Summit. Mayor.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mid pleasures and palaces, though we may roam, be it ever so humble, there's no place like home. Good morning, Savannah. Good morning, Savannah. Good morning. And so it's always a pleasure to serve as a servant of the greatest city on earth. And so we're glad that you're here with us today, and this is a very heartwarming view to look out and see all of you folks looking and thinking about the things that we're thinking about. I'm very glad to have with me two of our members of council. I see Alderman Nick Palumbo of the 4th District. Y'all show some love for Nick. And Alderman Dietrich Leggett from the 2nd District in the back as well. And our city manager, Jay Melder. Stand up. And if you're a member of Team Savannah, go ahead and stand up and let the folks see you. All of the wonderful folks that serve us. We're excited because we decided absolutely, and when I became mayor, Savannah did not have an affordable housing plan, and we promised to deliver one. And for us, it was based on the very simple but very complex premise that housing, quality housing, should be a right, period. And that everyone, every single person had the right to be able to be afforded a safe, comfortable, quality, affordable housing. And from that premise that housing in Savannah should be affordable for Savannahans. That seems kind of novel, right? And it sounds like it's easy, but it's really kind of difficult. And then COVID hit, and our worlds changed. But Savannah, being Savannah, created really opportunities for our economy to remain hot, although around the country we were seeing a much different experience. And so our wonderful economy got so hot that our housing market got hotter. And people were buying properties here, never saw them, never been here. I think I'm gonna move to Savannah. And these bidding wars and housing became much more unaffordable. In the midst of that, I appointed a task force to be able to help us to draft our first ever affordable housing plan. And I drafted, begged and cajoled two of our stalwart citizens to help lead that effort. I see one of them, Israel Small. Would you stand, please? So he didn't answer my first 5 phone calls, and so I called his wife, and then that's where I got him. And then Brent Grant with the United Way, and we put together an all-star team of people to really work on this issue. And totally during the pandemic, totally on Zoom, we were able to create the Savannah Affordable Housing Plan that really was the task force's mission of Housing Savannah. And from that, one of the first things that came from that was to create a NGO, a non-governmental organization, to really help push it further. At the end of the day, for us, we recognize that Savannah is in Chatham County. We recognize that we are, as we move, the community moves. And so therefore, we wanted to be very collaborative and very inclusive in our efforts. And so we stood up Housing Savannah. And since Jay Melder had a lot of experience of doing these types of things when we stole him from DC, we put him in charge of helping to be able to make that happen. And boy, what a difference this has all made. Because look at this room, talking about the same thing. And in this, we have been able to really report the work we've been able to do together. We had a record $8.4 million investment that exceeded our $4 million goal. We went 100% plus over that. We said we would benefit 766 households, but we said we would benefit 650. We ended up doing 766. We continue to make strides, particularly working with the Port Authority of Savannah, our friends and partners, in securing $6 million over 8 years, $750,000 a year, to be able to help folks in port side communities, west side communities, not only be able to stay in their homes, but to be able to afford their homes. That's, you clap for that. And we're continuing to make very, very hard choices, to make very, very difficult conversations, but then not being too proud to beg, Commissioner. Now, I know you have some tax credits in your car somewhere, or some money, but we recognize that Savannah's viability is really encompassed by really 4 major things. One is workforce. The second is housing. The third is transportation, and the fourth is childcare. You have to have all 4 of those. And we're not going to be the type of city that ultimately people have to travel from outside of Savannah to work in Savannah. We want people to live where they work, and we want them to work where they live. Some things we can control, and some things we can't. So the things that we can address, we will, and we do. We're speaking in a very loud legislative voice now while the session is on, that we need our state legislature to help us with some type of rent stabilization, because it's not fair that someone can raise rents 500% on a person and just expect them to be able to pay it, right? When we have emergencies happening in this community and there is a statement of emergency declared, Our reality is they do that so that you can't gouge people. You can't charge them more than what is reasonable and understandable. And in this case, we know, and we know people, all of you have known individuals that all of a sudden, they're paying one rent, and then next thing you know, oh, well, we're raising your rent, pay it or get out. That's not right. And so we're continuing to ask our state to help us do something reasonable and something that makes sense. So today is an opportunity for us to work with our partners. Housing Savannah is a partnership. We recognize we don't go alone, we go together. We go further because we go together. And so look at a wonderful cross-section of our community, and this is what our community looks like. We want you to be able to engage with us, work with us, talk with us, and we're going to be able to solve what we need to be able to solve. And we're going to keep working until we do. So I thank you all so much for being a part of this movement, not a moment. We are hoping that from this it's a continuing engagement, and we're planning to do all we can to put the money where we need to put it in, but also to encourage our partners, both for the municipal and county side, to also do their part as well. We're all in this together. Everybody say that. We're all in this together. But you have to say it like you mean it. We're all in this together. Again. We're all in this together. One loud time with your outside voice. We're all in this together. There's no place like home. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor. It's now my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists. So I'm going to go in alphabetical order. Bert Brantley began his tenure as the president and CEO of the Savannah Area Chamber of Commerce on February 1st after more than 2 decades of service in various state government leadership positions. Bert and the world-class team at the Chamber and Visit Savannah are dedicated to ensuring economic opportunity spreads throughout the business community and the Savannah region as it enters a new era of growth and prosperity. With more than 20 years of experience in state government, Brantley has held other roles in the Office of Governor Sonny Perdue, the Department of Driver Services, the State Railroad and Tollway Authority, and the Department of Transportation. And he is married to Tanya Brantley, a recently retired elementary physical education teacher. They have 2 daughters, Kendall and Carson, and both are students at University of Georgia. Ken Clark. Ken currently serves as the Deputy Director for the Housing Authority of Savannah. He has over 25 years of experience in the development and preservation of affordable housing and innovative programs that contribute to the long-term health and vitality of communities plagued by blight and the lack of capital investment. As an employee and consultant, Ken has worked with public housing authorities across the United States to structure and close mixed income and affordable housing transactions using various forms of financing. Prior to returning to Savannah in May of 2022, Ken was the Chief Financial Officer at Atlanta Housing Authority, where he held various finance and real estate roles over a 15-year period. Ken has also served as Deputy Executive Director at the Little Rock Housing Authority. Ken, please help me welcome Ken. Michael Kaigler is currently employed as county manager with the Chatham County government. He has over 30 years of local government experience. Michael has also served as assistant county manager, director of human resources and services, public works director, and employee services and employee relations manager with Chatham County. He holds a Bachelor of Science and a master's degree in public administration from Savannah State University. He is married to Vanessa Miller Kaigler and is the father of 1 daughter, Michaela. Please help me welcome Michael Kaigler. Joseph J. Melder is currently city manager for the city of Savannah, where he serves as the chief executive officer of Georgia's 2nd largest municipal corporation. With a budget of $425 million and a workforce of 2,500 employees, Jay oversees all aspects of the city's operations. Before his tenure in Savannah, Jay held the role of assistant city administrator for Washington, D.C., where he expertly managed the day-to-day operations of the district government. His responsibilities included overseeing more than 60 city departments, 37,000 employees, and a $17 billion annual operating budget. And last but not least, Christopher Nunn serves as the Commissioner of Georgia Department of Community Affairs. This role entails leadership of a broad array of programs dealing with community growth, housing, and economic development. Commissioner Nunn was appointed to this position in Phi Beta Kappa from Emory University and earned his master's degree at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. He and his wife Nancy have 2 children and live in Atlanta. Please help me welcome Commissioner Nunn. And to moderate our panel is Cindy Kelly, who is a retired nonprofit executive and a consultant. Thank you, Cindy, for moderating.
Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to have you. I want you to know that I have a couple million questions. We will not get through them. And I heard from some of you that you want an opportunity to ask some questions. So I will move our folks through the questions, and if we don't get through them, we'll still stop and have some time to allow you to ask any questions you might have of our esteemed panelists. All right, here we go. The first one is for Ken. What is important for people to know about affordable housing and workforce housing?
So definitely give me a sign here. It's a big one. So affordable housing and workforce housing, those phrases mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. How many subscribe to the newsletter that Housing Savannah publishes? That's good. I highlight that because I think they do a tremendous job of taking some very complex issues and making them simple and relatable, because this is a complex business. And so, again, there's home ownership, there's rental. You know, for purposes of our discussion, I just want to highlight the rental example and talk about it a little bit. So, with affordable workforce housing, there is this gap, as the mayor mentioned, between housing prices and incomes. And so, in order to solve for that, you have to target a maximum income level for your developments. And so, the deeper the targeting, the more downward pressure you have on cash flow. And with the downward pressure on cash flow, there's a need for more funding sources. And so when you start stacking those funding sources, you're introducing, regulation. You're extending the time, to execute transactions. And as the mayor mentioned, here in Savannah, it's a hot market. And so for affordable and workforce housing development, we can't keep pace, with market rate development. So we're in unprecedented times, I think, right now, with regard to advocacy and innovation at the federal, state, and local levels. So there's a lot of legislative and policy reform, that's being advanced. It's a lot. And so I know that all of us have, different levels of interaction, with this space. And so if I had to, simplify, at least the first glance, at these legislative matters, I would kind of challenge you to use this first test. Will it reduce costs? Because as I mentioned before, as you stack those layers of financing, there's costs associated with each layer. So does it reduce costs? Secondly, again, it extends the time. Does it reduce the time, to execute the transaction? If one of those things is a yes, then it's worth a second look. If you can check yes on both of those things, it needs to be a priority. So again, I think we're in unprecedented times. I think we're making history right now, and so look forward to continuing to engage in that.
Thank you, Ken. All right, this one's for Bert. Why is safe, stable, attainable housing so important to the health of a community?
Yeah, and I think I'll follow on with what Ken just said. I think there's been a little shift in, I would say, the political winds certainly in our state. I think part of this is because in areas like Savannah, and we've seen it in Atlanta and other growing areas around the state, the shift to workforce housing is a recognition that our teachers, our police officers, our firefighters, our social workers, those folks are caught in this gap of being able to afford to be able to live close to where they work and where they serve our citizens and our public. And so there's been, I think, a real shift towards, we've seen it, and I'm so glad that Commissioner Nunn could be here with us from the state. There's been a real shift to acknowledging that in areas with affordability challenges like we have here in Savannah, that we need to think about policies that Ken just talked about. Can we make development more affordable? Can we reduce costs, reduce regulation in places, and speed up the time of delivery? So that's, from a chamber perspective, our members, this is a big concern for their members. And the mayor said it absolutely right, but you have housing, then you have child care as well, and you have transportation. And those issues all come along with growth. So it's a great place to be. I mean, there's a lot of places, particularly in Georgia, rural parts of Georgia that are dying and are decreasing in their population. So it's a real great spot to be, to have these challenges of growth. But it takes all of us working together to figure out how we can approach those and put together a real solid public policy and funding programs that really address the real issue. So, from our employers, our members, they want their employees to be able to live, hopefully, as close as possible. That reduces their risk of transportation issues. Maybe near public transit, that works, and getting them back and forth to work. They want to be able to have child care so that they don't have child care issues that prevent them from being able to get to work either. So what you mentioned, safe and stable, ultimately that is the health of an employer, is their employees' ability to be able to get to work, to stay at work, not have these issues that come up every day that prevent them from serving their customers and their clients. And so it's important to our members, certainly, and we're glad to play our role, which is to bring that perspective into this larger conversation of what we need to do from a business community to support really good public policy that leads to more housing being available for all of our public servants, but also our other even private employers and their employees that are out serving us every day.
Thank you. All right, Michael, this one's for you. If you could do or change just one thing to increase the supply of housing throughout Chatham County, what would it be and why?
I think I would look at changing some of the land use and zoning plan. If you look at
There's applause? I want to go back on my answers and not just applause.
one of the issues that we have locally, and it's been something, the traditional family in Savannah, Chatham County, we strive to own a single family detached residence. And with the growth of the population, with the economy being as it is, that's just not realistic going forward. So looking at density, and I know density is a bad word for a lot of folks, but we need to move to more townhomes, multifamily dwelling, because that affects the affordability also. There are very few families in this community now that can afford a single family detached residence. It's just not going to be, that's not going to be the future of our community. And as we grow, as Bert had said, previously, it's a good problem to have, but we all have to work together to kind of solve that. So looking at land use and zoning is going to be, if I could change one thing, that would be it.
Thank you. All right, Christopher, this one's for you. Would you please share an example from another Georgia community that you think shows exciting innovation in addressing the need for affordable and workforce housing?
Yeah, before you get started, let me just say, we call Christopher the professor. So get ready, get out your notepad, we'll get a lecture here. Please go for it.
Do I need a hook?
I love speaking on stage with Bert. So honestly, first of all, thank you for having me, and it's an honor to be on this panel. I'm also honored. I've got a couple of my PCA colleagues who live right here in your region that are here. Ebony, Jennifer, raise your hand. So let me share a couple of examples.
Here we go.
I'll try to go quick. So there's a community similar size to yours that has done some really interesting things, leveraging Governor Kemp's workforce housing initiative to invest infrastructure funds to help build affordable housing in their community. Let me explain. They have a community-oriented housing development that is working in that community that actually was working on a 5-phase development plan. The first 4 phases actually single-family residential, and the anticipated 5th phase would be a competitive tax credit development. Again, recognizing that you need for sale and for rent homes in your communities to meet all of the needs across the income spectrum. The first phase of that development actually came out of the ground with the support from the city with a tax allocation issue. They put $1.6 million into the infrastructure that accommodated the first phase. 31 homes that were sold in a community that had not seen any development, and that the price point on the sale was $175,000. That's within the striking distance of that missing middle that you were alluding to momentarily. The problem was accelerating the next 4 phases of development. So they came to the state and they were able to borrow on some infrastructure funding to build out the infrastructure for those next 4 phases. Let me explain the homes that they're building. These are, the first 31 were sold to 7 families that were attached to the nearby military base, both enlisted and civilian. 2 or 3 were local teachers, 1 retired, 2 active. 1 was a local Walmart cashier who had the income and had the credit to be able to get into a home, but needed down payment assistance and needed the access to a home that was up to a good price. So that's an interesting example of the community-oriented housing development. Another rural community in our state, and remember, just because this is a solution for those communities doesn't mean it's a solution for yours, but it's an interesting approach. Through a local foundation, they actually finance the appraisal gap on housing, because this is a rural community, so the price point for housing that they could that made it affordable to folks in those communities was about $190,000 to $200,000. Unfortunately, you can't build a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home on half-acre lots for that amount of money. There's an appraisal gap between what it could be sold for and what it actually costs for a developer to build it. And so in this case, a foundation came in and financed that appraisal gap. That's something we've seen in some other states, but it's really interesting. You talked about density. There's a community up in North Georgia that actually, and this drew some interesting comments from folks who were around the table reviewing the application for some infrastructure funding. They just approved, City Council just approved 39 new homes on a 3-acre infill lot. Okay? That's density, and that's not tiny homes. Those are 16 to 1,800 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes. But the local council passed new legislation that enabled them to do that sort of infill density. So a lot of really interesting things going on around the state. I will say, and I think Van had to step out, but y'all have done a great job in this community with your trust fund
The city of Macon, Lester Miller, the mayor of Macon, and Andre Dickens in Atlanta also employed that approach. And I think it gives you some flexibility that many communities, many rural communities in this state would give their left arm to have that sort of resource. This is not an issue that is unique to the coastal environment. Right? This is an issue. I was talking last night, standing in line at Leopold's with a couple from Toronto. They are dealing with this same issue in the Toronto suburbs. And so I think that the fact that you are overlaying that with growth is a very enviable position to be in, and you should be applauded for focusing on the solutions.
Thank you. All right, Jay, our question. We know that it's important to learn from the past and to evolve our approaches as communities and circumstances evolve. Can you please share a housing approach that we've utilized in the past that the City of Savannah is now evolving to suit our current needs?
Yeah, first I'll say, one new approach is when the guy with money gives you advice on how to get it, you listen to it and follow through. Commissioner, I think it's really three things. Cindy has really been spurred by the Savannah Affordable Housing Fund. Number one is you have to build all of the funds. I think this city and the city of Savannah, the Chatham County, in particular, the city of Savannah, have done a fantastic job for years and years and years doing what they can with the resources that they have. And they got very creative. They learned how to cut corners. They learned how to add velocity to the project, and they produced a lot of housing with very little resource. Now, when we're able to bring that to scale, we're able to produce more housing. So, number one is it takes all kinds of tools in the toolbox, and it takes all kinds of partners to get it done. Number two, and I'll echo what Gordon Hamilton said, and that's density. There's a reason that humans left the cave to build cities. Cities are the most efficient place to live, and we have to be able to add density. It's per unit, it's cheaper for police, it's cheaper for fire, it's cheaper for roads, it's cheaper for water and sewer. It creates livable communities. We cannot be scared of density in an urban area. We simply don't have the land for 6-acre lots, for 2-acre lots, for 1-acre lots, for half-acre lots. So we have to think about the zoning issues. We have to get comfortable with density, especially in the urban cores of our city. And number three, and which is why I'm really glad at the Melder our partnership with the Workforce Authority, is we have to, as a community, recognize that housing is infrastructure. Housing is just as important to our economic viability as deepening the channel, as maintaining our Class A rails, as building new interstates and maintaining those interstates. It's absolutely a part of the infrastructure and the fabric that makes our community tick. And if we don't have enough of it, just like if we don't have enough roads, we don't have a deep enough channel, we don't have a high enough bridge, that economic viability falls away. So if we see a room full of private sector partners, government partners, nonprofit partners come to discuss this issue, we know that we're talking about the real thing. This is housing is absolutely a part of our infrastructure, and we have to think about it that way. Nobody blinks an eye when we have to run a new sewer pipe to Hyundai to the mega site supply. Nobody blinks an eye. Huge amounts of money to do that. We have to stop blinking an eye when we're talking about adding density, when we're talking about investment.
Yeah, and I'm going to add what they say. I think, we have to make sure, and of course I would speak on my chamber hat on that, developers, bankers, Georgia ports, the private sector is welcomed into those discussions, not seen as some sort of boogeyman or negative influence. I mean, these folks are in business. Obviously, they're in business to make money, but they're also in business to improve our community. So the fact that our public partners are willing to let into the discussion our partners over at Georgia Ports, our developers and our bankers into the solution so we can work together and come up with solutions that work is really going to be the best way forward rather than just sort of a, dismissing them because they have some kind of profit motive in their decision making. I think that's one of the things that we've seen throughout this region that causes of the growth that we've had because of the development we've had. You get some, people looking at those at our banking community or our development community with, believing they have ulterior motives. They live here too, and they want a great community, and we've got to welcome all those voices into the conversation.
And I just want to say, and echo to that, and I appreciate the mayor and Jay, your points about, that housing is vital community infrastructure, because I think that that's something that has been not widely embraced until the last maybe 5 or so years, when we have a dearth of housing. We can sit up here and talk all day long. We can finance all day long. If you don't have developers that are putting sticks in the ground, in which someone can live, then we aren't going to solve the housing. So it really does take all of those partners, and I would just really echo that. Our developers across this state are some of our best partners at DCA because they're doing the work.
All right, thank you. Ken, this one's for you. We've been talking a little bit about evolving, and it's our understanding that the Housing Authority is evolving its approach and model. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I would say probably over the last 20 years, housing authorities have been evolving. And so it kind of comes from the flexibility that our great partners at HUD provide us. And so they have been, over the years, launching what they call demonstration programs to say, hey, what we've been doing hasn't really worked. We need you all to be more innovative in how you use the resources. And so we can look at the Hope 6 program 20 years ago that started pushing us toward the mixed income communities. And why that's important to this discussion is because it began a process where we started to engage with the private sector. And so that has continued to evolve to the point where now we're looking for opportunities to engage more with the private sector with regard to financing. We have tools in our toolbox that we can use to help make financing more achievable. But we also have the ability to attract financing because of our status as a housing authority. So I say all that to say, we really want to talk to you, our development partners, our local partners, to look at transactions and figure out how we can go into the toolbox and try to solve for yes. Because we've already talked about a lot of the challenges, with doing affordable and workforce housing. There's a lot of development going on, and so we want to make sure that there's an opportunity, for us to inject, some assisted housing in some of the development activity. Then we'd like to do that as well. So it's really continuing to find innovative ways to engage with the private sector, and also the philanthropic community, because I think that's another key piece to this. Again, it's continuing to evolve, working with more partners to try to solve some of the issues that we have.
Okay, thank you. Bert, in your opinion, what is the biggest opportunity the local business community has to support the preservation and development of housing?
Yeah, I think it's being at the table, being in the conversations, and not getting frustrated if there's something they see that they don't agree with or don't support. We need them to be in the room. I think Commissioner Nunn's point is exactly right. We can have all the best ideas and plans, but if the folks who are going to deliver the project aren't interested, or they're out, they can build market rate housing out all day long. And So for those that are willing to go through all the hoops and all the regulations that it takes to participate in a lot of these programs, let's welcome them to the table and make sure that we are figuring out a way, to Ken's point, to get to yes, to get them to be able to take the risk that comes on with building a project, and just make sure that we're thinking through how to get and get multiple, hopefully, folks involved. You have good choices to make with different the development community, and I think that's always a risk. I mean, it's always going to be a challenge. People are everything's a priority. I can go build this, or I can go build that. I can build here, build there, build this site. And so every one of these folks are making that business decision they've got to keep their employees employed and keep their companies moving. So I think what we could do is just be at the table and be in the discussion and making sure that we're bringing that. And I can see a lot of our folks that are here today. It's exciting to get this many people in one room and working on this issue. And the worst thing we can do is to not participate and walk away. So being welcome in that conversation to be part of it, and we're glad to do it.
Thank you. And this one's for Jay. You've had the benefit of living and working in other communities. What approaches or ideas have you witnessed that have been especially successful in addressing NIMBYism and encouraging a pro-housing community?
Great question. I don't know that there's a simple bullet to that. I've been a part of a lot of hard housing projects in the homelessness space and the affordable housing space. But it really, it starts with meetings like this. It starts with buy-in, and it starts with a community value that's an all-in for affordable housing, not all in for workforce housing. We understand the strategies that it's going to take to get there. It's going to take resources. It's going to take tough zoning decisions. It's going to take more density. And when we can sit in a room and all raise our hands and look at the right things, but when a project comes into your backyard, it becomes a different story. And I think that we all have to kind of look inward and help our neighbors look inward to say, listen, if we want a community that's going to continue to thrive, we want a community that's going to continue to be diverse, that's going to have people from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, to be able to work 40 hours and live comfortably in a fun city, then we're going to have to accept this density and these housing developments. And I'll echo some of these, Bert and development sometimes in all places that I've worked is a four-letter word. Developers are a four-letter word. And there's a tremendous amount of community angst around that, and all of that is valid. But we can't develop something without developers. And I think we have the opportunity now as a community to, the development pressure is here. We're not begging for somebody to build a strip mall in Savannah. We're not begging for a motel service to come to, right? They all want to be. So we have an opportunity as a community to shape the kind of development that we want. And right now, the folks in this room are saying, we want to see more affordable housing, we want to see workforce housing. But again, developers can't do that on their own. It takes a bank, it takes public financing, it takes bringing down the cost of that housing to be able to do it, and it takes all kinds of partners in the room, and it takes the community saying yes to those projects. In with this, I have the great pleasure of working for 9 incredible public servants. And I just want to acknowledge that it's really the courage of those 9 elected officials and those on the county commission that have to vote yes on these projects sometimes. So give some love to your elected officials. That's a tough vote to do, but we know that it's absolutely necessary, and we need to be able to give our elected leaders all of the support, encouragement, and drive to be able to make themselves.
Good answer, Jay.
All right, this one's for Michael. What is your philosophy on the use of incentives versus the use of mandates for increasing housing development?
you know, if you'd asked me that question several years ago, I would have said, you know, incentives are the way to go. Kind of changed that philosophy over the last few years, particularly with the growth that we've had here locally. You know, as they said, the developers, they're going to need help getting these affordable houses built. They're not going to be able to do it on their own. So, with the changes in the zoning code, changes in land use ordinances, I think writing something in there that will help steer those developers into helping build affordable homes is going to be, I think, the way to go. I know it's not popular, and as Jay said, we've gotten a lot of support from our board, and I think I've got a couple here, Commissioner Melder and Commissioner Locke. I saw both of them here today to stand. They've been very supportive, and you know, in the past, housing was not a county initiative. It's always been a city initiative. And with Chairman Ellis, when he took office, one of the things that he wanted was to change and have our focus more on affordable housing. So we partnered with the city to help fund, trust fund. We committed to, you know, participating. But those, getting our council, our board, commissioners, help mandate more things that will drive affordable housing, help those developers. I think that's where we need to go.
I just wanted to say there's a lot of talk about housing and work well together. And I just want to say the fact that county and city work together on board, council on homelessness. Michael and I are board members for Housing Savannah Incorporated. That both the county and the city are invested in the solution is a tremendous demonstration of the ways in which we do collaborate very well on issues impacting on the community. So I want to thank Michael and the entire county team for being a part of that.
We don't do everything.
And I can tell you, there's examples around the state that are much more difficult when it comes to cities and counties working together. So, you know, disagreeing doesn't mean you're not working together, right? And so there are different perspectives that get brought to the table, but I think the examples that we see here that Jay mentioned, and there are a bunch of others too, when it's applicable and available to work together, you know, they're doing it. And I can tell you as a business community that we applaud that, love to see it.
All right.
We're going to be here forever.
All right, this one's for you, Christopher. In your opinion, what is the outlook for the next 5 years for state and federal funding for housing in Georgia? What are you concerned about, and what are you optimistic about?
So I think the outlook is strong because you look at the people around this room. Like, this is a topic that is important. It is bipartisan. It is, you know, there's significant need. I'll start on the federal level. You know, we've got very good support from, you know, both of our senators, from many of our congressional delegations. Buddy Carter down here has been very, very, very supportive of the work that we're doing on the federal front. There's actually some legislation that is working its way through Congress right now that would help us to extend the federal tax credits, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. On the state side, I think it's really important, and perhaps we don't do a good job marketing because we're just busy doing. The state does an enormous amount as it relates to housing. So in the state of Georgia in 2000, we doubled down on the 1986 federal housing tax credit, which develops multifamily for rent housing for those who earn less than 80% of area median income. That's a very wide term. This is for those in your community that are on the lower third of the income earning spectrum. Okay? That's probably the folks who are working, making 25 bucks an hour, trying to raise a family and need someplace to live. Otherwise, they're not going to be productive members of your community. In Georgia, we put a substantial amount of resources into that housing tax credit program, and that helps us to extend the amount of development that can take place in our state. Over the last 5 years, we have financed the development of between 35 and 40,000 units of housing, either new or rehabilitated housing all across the state. That's a big deal. Right? Now, we also put a lot of money into the first-time homebuyer program. Georgia Dream, some of you are familiar with, and we put more than $250 million a year into financing first-time homebuyers, including homebuyer education, down payment assistance, etc. What we have seen, because in our program, we have the average or median home price is about $207,000. Okay, there are not a lot of homes on the market in our state, much less in your community, for that price point, and that's the median. So we've actually seen a decline in the number of originations over the last couple of years. And the governor has helped us recognizing that we need to address supply on the for sale side as well. And so that was the impetus for the governor's rural workforce housing initiative, which I talked a little bit about earlier. In the budget, in the amended budget, which is passed the House and Senate, we have additional funding for that program to continue that. So I think that the answer to the first question is strong. I think the second part was what gives me concern. I'll just say maybe two things. When you mentioned developers as a four-letter word, Jay, I saw some people start to squirm in their seats. We need more people building housing, right? We need more people that are willing to, that view this as an attractive community in which to build. That view this as a place that they can. How many people got in business that are in business so you can lose money? Anybody? Okay, so. Yeah, this is a public-private partnership. Nobody is going to get into business to lose money. They've got to be able to make a living, but they also have to produce something that is vital community infrastructure. So one of my concerns relates to the developer. We have lost a number of developers in our state since the 2008 time frame. And that's one concern. I think the other concern is the question you asked these two gentlemen about left. The big problem with housing is it's a very complex issue, and yet every single person is an expert on housing because they have lived housing experience, right? And that generally yields a perception of either you need to live like me, and therefore all housing needs to look like an acre of land and this and that and the other. Or what are you going to do for me? And I think that the reality is we've got to think as leaders. You have to think as local leaders about how we serve the needs of our entire community. And in order to do that, you've got to start with understanding the community. Understanding what the price point is that your workforce can afford. Understand what the needs are, what the preferences are in the community. So I think those two things, like the coalescing around what is actually needed to serve the community, and then actually having the private sector participation to build that, are my two biggest concerns.
All right, thank you. We're actually doing pretty good. We made it through the questions and had Q&A. All right, Ken, this one's for you. Can you tell us about a project anywhere in the country that you're particularly impressed with that you'd like to replicate here or use as an inspiration or model?
So there are a lot, but I think the common denominator is probably sponsorship, right? So when you can have an organizational arm that consists of the public sector, the private sector, the philanthropic community, that can help to shape the vision, for a project, and then steward that, to fruition. I think that's a good model. And so whether that's looking at, something more regional or a community, it works. And so purpose-built is a model out there that follows that course. We have East Savannah United here. That's a part of that model. Focuses on the community. These are the needs. This is the vision. We'll steward it to fruition. But you also need that at a larger level as well, because you can't boil the ocean. And this is big territory that we're talking about. And so being able to prioritize work, because resources are so precious, and being able to have some visibility, on the pipeline, of projects, so that one can see the needs, so that we can plug in strategically to get more projects done. I think those are a couple of models, that lead to success.
Okay, thank you. Jay, this one is for you. The Savannah Affordable Housing Fund has been successful inside the city of Savannah city limits over the past decade. How do we work together as a larger community to expand these efforts to serve and support the entire community and region?
Well, the dollar doesn't need to have a political boundary. The color of the money does, right? And I think that's the constraint. If City of Savannah taxpayers are putting money into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, then, the City of Savannah taxpayers, expect that those dollars are going to be leveraged to support housing in the City of Savannah, which is fair. Which is why, it's great to have people in the county engaged in this issue. And as the mayor said, as Savannah goes, so does the region, but the reverse is true as well. As the region goes, so does Savannah. So we have to adopt a regional mindset. We have to adopt that we're part of a larger community. We have strange boundaries to begin with. And we know that life isn't different on one side of Wild Heron Road than it is on the other. And so we have to think collaboratively, and we have to act collaboratively. But that's also going to take investment from every municipality in the region, from every county in the region, if we want to be able to produce the kind of housing that we need. The Savannah Affordable Housing Trust Fund, just like most effective trust funds across the nation, for every dollar that's put in there, leverages 7, 8 to 9 additional dollars in new capital to be able to fund housing. If it's connected to a low-income housing tax credit project, that ratio is 25 to 1. So it's a tremendous return on investment. It's incredibly flexible. And so as we want to see the Housing Production Trust Fund, whatever we call it, the Savannah Chatham, the Coastal Empire, Affordable Housing Fund, whatever we need to do to be able to expand the flow of funds into that, from public entities to private entities, which is what Housing Savannah was set up to do, was to get private dollars. That's how we expand its reach. It's a tool that can work in any part of our community, as long as we have builders who are willing to build, and projects that the fund is willing to support.
All right, thank you. So Michael, we know that elected officials are challenged to balance constituent needs, the larger needs of our growing community, and re-election. What can we do to ensure that housing is a top priority for elected officials throughout the county? We talked a little bit about this, but maybe we can make it a little shorter.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that my team does consistently is we provide our elected officials data. Our decisions need to be data-driven. And we're looking at this problem as a whole. As Dave indicated, housing needs don't stop at the city limits. And we have the flexibility to reach out and touch everybody in the county wide. We've looked at, in fact, we're working with the city of Fort Wentworth on a housing project now. And that's designed and targeted for low income or working class people. And that term, going back to the term affordable housing, you know, that means different things based on what your income level is. So just kind of looking at that. But I guess the short answer is providing your elected officials with data. I think everybody in this community is aware that we've got a housing shortage. Everybody in this community is aware that we don't have enough affordable housing for the people who actually make this community go. So I think it's providing them that data makes their decisions a lot easier.
Cindy, can I add one quick? I think the fact that this number of people showed up today, we need your help in letting your elected officials know that this is an important issue to you. You know, that when somebody gets mad about something that's in their neighborhood, or they obviously contact, and that's what makes these votes very difficult. But sometimes the silent majority is out there and it's too silent. And so I've never known an elected official, I know a lot of them, I've never known one that didn't want to hear from their constituents. I can tell you that to give them help in supporting a tough vote, it's great to hear from the greater community to balance out what they're hearing from. Usually the no's are louder than the folks out there that are supporting a general policy and general moving forward. So all of you guys can play a critical role in communicating with your elected officials about the topics that are important to you, and I assume since you're here today that this is one. So I think that's something that we can all do, and certainly a service we offer to our chamber members, that we advocate to our elected officials on their behalf, on behalf of their perspective. But that's something that the more folks that are contacting them and giving them that feedback, the better informed their decision making. Or a condo or a single family house, that whoever moves into that house frees up another place to live, and whoever moves into that dwelling frees up another one. And so, we a lot of focus, and rightly so, on the affordable and the workforce housing, but we also need supply, all throughout the price point range. We'll have some announcement later today, but the state is helping us in our region identify what those price points are, what we have today, what's being built and what's being permitted, and then what the gaps are going to be with the growth that we're seeing coming in manufacturing and with the distribution and on the visitation side, all this great growth that we have military that's coming here. So we've got some good news to announce later, but I think it's critically important to recognize that we have a shortage at all price points. It's not just on the affordable side.
Yeah, I just want to echo on that point, because we've talked a lot about this topic today, but it is complex. And if you think about housing as a continuum, I've talked a lot about the homeownership piece and about multifamily development. We haven't even touched on the opposite end of the continuum, which is homelessness. But Bert just talked about the fact that if we're building homes that people can afford to purchase, where are those folks living today? If I can't find a home to buy, if I am new to your community, if I'm a recent college grad or a recent high school grad that's gone to work, or hey, where do I go if I can't find a home to buy? I stay with mom and dad, perhaps, or I keep renting where I'm renting, right? Well, if I keep renting, then what about that person who needs to start renting? Where do they go? You've got it's this whole cascading effect, and there's lots of data. Sorry, the professor of me comes out. There's lots of data that shows that every $100 increase in rent in your community drives on the opposite end a 9 to 10% increase in homelessness. That may be chronic, that may be temporary, living with your parents or living with a friend. But it's a whole continuum, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
All right, how'd we do? All right, so we've got about 15 minutes for questions, and And we have some mic runners, so go ahead.
Good morning. A lot of times developers, they receive the tax credits, they get the deal, they start, but the subsidized living is smaller than the rest of the market units. They receive the credit because of the tax credit, but then when it's time to build, there's not enough subdivided units in that particular affordable housing area.
So one thing that I want to encourage is, because every one of you is leaving here as an advocate, is when someone says something that you don't believe to be true, I want you to call it, right? Because so tax credit development, I'm going to explain how it works very simply. Okay? If I'm a developer and I'm looking to build a new market rate development and I'm going to charge $2,500 a month in rent, that's not affordable to the folks in your community. No. But I can't afford to build it if I'm going to have to pay a mortgage payment on this development. So if I come in and compete for tax credits, those tax credits are serving to create equity so all of the developers in the room don't have to take out as big of a mortgage. They can afford to instead keep rents at $1,200 a month versus $2,500 a month because they're not having to pay as much debt. They have to do that for 30 years. There is no subsidy. This is not subsidized. The tax credit development is not the same as a housing choice voucher. Those rents are fixed for 30 years. So the scenario you described, I don't believe to be accurate in a tax credit development. Okay? Now, there may be, and I'm going to toss it to Ken because he's got as much expertise on this, but when you get into the deep targeting, which he was describing earlier, which is looking at folks, and he was describing a capital stack. He's like, look, when you've got somebody earning 20 or 25% in area median income, you've got to stack a lot of funding on that to make it work. That's not tax credits. Okay, so you want to talk to that?
Yeah, so it comes back to financing, and so to the extent you're developing a property, the deeply targeted units, can't support 100%, of that development. So you have to have market rate units to complement the subsidized units. And so that's probably what you're seeing in a lot of those instances. And so we just need more of it to create more opportunities. With housing authority, we have a subsidy, that we can affix to development. So we're constantly looking for opportunities to do that, so that we can spread opportunities for assisted housing. But that dynamic has to do with being able to finance the development.
And I can chime in locally, like if we're not using the tax credit deal, we're simply using our mechanisms with affordable housing fund or CHSA. Any development we're going to do, are going to have to be filed as affordable. And those rates are going to be fixed as well. The other 49% are likely going to be market rate, but that's also adding to the capital stack that allows that cash flow to lower the rents for 51% of those units. So it's all a finance game. It's all driven by banks.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm going to Clinton. Did you have one in the back?
Okay, talk to me about transportation. So we've got a CAT can currently operate in Savannah and portions of unincorporated Chatham County and very small slivers of Garden City and Fort Wentworth. How do we move towards not only a county-wide transit system with high-frequency buses moving where people need to go, but to perhaps a more regional transit agency that can really connect a variety of different counties over on the coast to jobs and medicine and education?
One of the things I was saying, and it goes back to those elected officials making decisions. You need to lobby your elected officials. There is a movement now with the city of Port Wentworth and Garden City to expand transit services in their area. So they see the need. But I would say lobbying, the elected officials to help them understand the need for transit services into those areas of the county that currently don't have transit services. Because everybody can't own a car. I mean, if you drive anywhere in this county now, particularly with the dumps going on, it's, you're stuck in traffic. And if we don't move more towards mass transit, that problem will only get worse. We'll be Atlanta here after a while. So I'm sure you want that. So lobbying your elected officials is going to be one issue. The other is, as Hyundai's been a prime example of how working together in the region is going to be beneficial for us all. So I foresee, as things keep growing, a more move to expand transit out into the region, out into the 4 or 5 county area, to kind of move people more physically through the area.
Yeah, let me quickly add, I was in Atlanta 25 years ago. We were talking about this, and because of the rules around the transit services, we had to essentially create a state agency to run transit across county lines to be able to do this, the express bus service, because a lot of times rules and county lines get in the way. I was, surprised to learn that CAT is not constrained by that because of the nature of Chatham County and a lot of the unique rules and laws around it. So CAT actually has the ability to go across county lines without a change in law or in their authority. And so it all comes down to exactly what Michael said. It comes down to support by our elected leaders and our officials to provide that kind of service. And I know I talk with CAT a lot. We are absolutely working towards an express service that would serve Hyundai and particularly other employers like Gulfstream, the folks that have employees that come in, from population centers. But same that I mentioned on housing, transportation the same way. If our elected leaders know that it's a priority of everyone in this room, it makes it way easier for them to take that vote to fund that instead of funding something else. Every funding decision is made, you're funding this instead of something else. It's really important as well. So it takes all of us communicating with them and giving them the support that they need to be able to take those really difficult votes.
All right, thank you. Another question? In the front here?
Good morning, our esteemed panel. And I have a question kind of about in the meantime. Because as we discuss housing and housing development, we know that this is a long game, right? We know that we're working on that. But right now, what we're seeing is about 45% of our county overall being terribly rent burdened and 22% severely rent burdened. And we're seeing a lot of families displaced, having to move into hotels and other things. So I was just wondering if there was a conversation around what can we do in the interim time to sort of stay this additional burden and stretch on a social safety net that's already strained in our community to be able to serve and support our families, staying in their home. Have we looked at any best practices, additional models, such as the one like Star C out of Atlanta or any of that? So have we had any conversation around those models and things that we can do in the interim?
Alicia, great question. Thanks for step up. So I think that we have to look at the long term because that's going to be the solution for the immediate, but we can't ignore the immediate. You're absolutely right. So what I think we're absolutely doing that, and I'm going to turn to homelessness on the other end of that continuum to talk about it. Our community started an interagency council on homelessness. This is a recognition that it's a resource constrained work, we all have to be rowing in the same direction. We have to be able to have a strategic plan around that. We have to know where our gaps are. We have to know what our community is facing, what our residents are facing, what our families are facing, what our individuals are facing, and be able to connect them to the services that are going to help them reach their full potential and be stably housed. So on that end, yes, we're working really hard. I saw Stephanie Capel in the audience. She's the Executive Director of the Interagency Council on Homelessness. Again, the county and the city are both on that committee, and we're working with providers, with community, with people with lived experience to try to understand where those gaps are. We are, in fact, Alicia, and if you are not a part of this, we need to make sure that you are in the process of a strategic plan to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-reoccurring in Chatham County. And that's, we don't have the resources to tackle it yet. We've got, I think some good news is going to come out with, and I also saw, I think Jennifer DeLong is in the audience as well, our Homeless Authority, our other great partner in that work. We're going to see some encouraging news on our PIT numbers this year, and we are doing that work to try to produce those resources now. But if we don't look at the broader picture, then we're only going to be triaging for the rest of the time. We're only going to be fighting a battle that we can't win if we're not building the infrastructure to support everything. And I want to make this clear too, because I've worked in both spaces for a long time. The solution to homelessness is also affordable housing. Just like it's a solution to our workforce crisis, just like it's a solution to our affordability, it really is the solution. So we have to be building that infrastructure.
All right, we've got time for one more question.
What are you doing to get the community and people that represent the community involved in these conversations? Because it seems like a lot more focus on the growth coming from outside instead of what the community needs from the inside right now.
I want to acknowledge we have got a community land trust now in Savannah, Chatham, which is wonderful. So thank you for your work. I think one of the ways in which we're hoping to bring community together, one was with the Housing Savannah Action Plan, which I know Israel can speak more about, but had 40, 50 members, a wide swath of community engagement. We want to continue to have engagements like this. But I also think it's true, and I think Christopher said it earlier, it's about understanding the needs of the community, which means involving the community in the decisions that we make, right? And so not every neighborhood, I'm just speaking for Savannah specifically, not every neighborhood in the city of Savannah needs the same thing, or wants the same thing, or is worried about the same thing, or is challenged by the same thing. So it's not going to be a cookie cutter approach that's going to be able to solve the problem across the entire city. We have to look at it community to community. We have to look at it by experience, household by household, and be able to tailor some approaches that are going to work for everybody. And so if we're not creating the right spaces for that input and for that engagement and for that expertise to come from our neighborhoods and our communities, then please help me and others be able to create those right spaces, because we won't solve the problem if we're not doing that well.
We actually have time for one more question over here.
Thank you very much. And this is actually a cardinal sin. I'm not going to ask a question, but put out a plea to you. I just stepped down as the Dean of Architecture at the University of Texas at Austin. We have a very large planning program, PhD program in planning. Density comes up everywhere as if it's the answer. It's a variable, and it's a variable that's parametric, which means that sometimes it's good and sometimes it's very bad. We've completed a multi-year study of 42 cities in the United States that have enacted density policy changes, particularly in zoning. In 41 out of 42 cities, the following things
very much for those comments.
I'd also like to encourage everyone to give our fabulous panelists a hand. Thank you for your time.
And as they are exiting the stage, it is my pleasure to next introduce our next segment. Whitney Shepard is an entrepreneur and community leader with more than 25 years of experience in policy, planning, and design. She co-founded the consulting firm Transport Studio in 2013, and Whitney manages diverse projects and serves as technical lead for geographic information systems, communications, traffic engineering, transportation planning, and public policy. Transport Studio's mission is to promote healthy communities for the common good. Her passion for the built and natural environments extends beyond the planning profession. With her husband, she co-owns Green Truck Neighborhood Pub, a Savannah restaurant that features local and organic farmers and craft American brewers. Together, they support local business and a variety of community organizations. Whitney serves as the immediate past president of the Georgia Planning Association, an organization of over 1,100 members statewide, including public agencies at all levels of government, private consultants, academics, concerned citizens, and planning officials. She is a state and federal policy advocate for the chapter. A committed grassroots organizer, she chairs the Chatham County Housing Coalition and the Savannah Mobility Advisory Committee. She was a charter member of the Coastal Empire Society of Women Engineers. She is a registered professional engineer and holds bachelor's degrees in architecture and civil engineering and a Master of Science in Civil Engineering from Georgia Tech. Whitney is also a 2014 graduate of Leadership Southeast Georgia. Whitney is going to be talking with us about our unique and opportunities and challenges here in Chatham County.
Good morning. This is a fine-looking group of people. I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you all for joining us. So as an engineer, I do a lot of technical writing, so I'm going to give you the executive summary first and then get into the details. So here's my executive summary. 1, growth is coming. You all know that. I know that. If we don't plan for it, we're going to get sprawl. And we're going to lose what we love about where we live. And with sprawl comes congestion. And as a traffic engineer who works in the planning and public policy space, I don't like either of those things. But if we plan for the growth, we can achieve not only new areas that are like what we love about where we live, the greatest city on earth, Savannah, Georgia, but also preserve what we love about where we live. But it's going to take a plan. This is not a local problem, as you all know, I'm sure. This is a national problem. But one of the things that's happening nationwide is not only do we have housing deficits, but those deficits are moving from our urban areas out into our suburbs and in our small towns. So everywhere now has a housing supply shortage. Growth is here. You know that, but what you may not have seen is that the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget has projected that from 2020 to 2060, the 4-county region of the Joint Development Authority is projected to grow by more than 41%. And y'all, those projections were developed before Hyundai was announced. Before Hyundai was announced, we were projected to grow by 41% in our 4-county area. Speaking of Hyundai, when we talk about housing supply, yes, we need to build more housing, but where we build matters. Housing needs to be next to our job centers and next to where our services are, or we're going to suffer from super inefficient growth strategies, but also expensive growth and inefficient service delivery, which all of the local government folks in the room should be cringing about. Housing also needs to be located near services, and services need to be located near our jobs. So the way we're growing today is the opposite of that. How much are we growing, by the way? Well, one of the things that we ask ourselves at the Housing Coalition is what do we need to plan for, because we are numbers people as well. I don't know if Commissioner Nunn's still in the room, but I appreciate his commitment to data. In 2019, we projected that we had a housing deficit in Chatham County of 10,000 units. That number is projected to grow to at least 14,500 units if our housing deficit keeps pace just countywide with the growth projected by OPB. If, in fact, Chatham County grows at the rate of our 4-county region, which is very likely to happen, and maybe even more if you look at today's policies in those 4 counties, we're going to need more than 36,000 housing units in Chatham County by 2060. And again, those numbers, those projections are based on analysis done before Hyundai was announced. Oops, sorry, wrong way. We've talked a lot about density, and I almost feel like I have nothing left to say because the panel did such a great job, except that I get to bring some numbers to you to back up what they said. Density matters because density drives livability, and there are some rules of thumb that as planners we know. We know that it takes about 8 dwelling units an acre to achieve just a basic livable, walkable community like Ardsley Park, for example, where I live. If we want to promote a density that can support small businesses, things like neighborhood grocery stores and pharmacies and the services that we all want, we need to achieve 18 dwelling units an acre. And if we look at Chatham County, the only neighborhood that today achieves that density is downtown Savannah. So the tourists get the benefit of our most livable neighborhood while all of the rest of us live outside of those areas. Laura Lane asked me to produce some opportunity maps, and y'all, I have over 30 slides in approximately 10 minutes, so I'm going to sprint through these. But I want to tease you because I want you to be interested in engaging with us on the Housing Coalition and join us in this movement. So one opportunity is certainly redeveloping today's residential areas, and if you look at building value versus land value, that's a really good indicator of properties that are likely to redevelop or that have a lot of redevelopment potential. So we have been looking at that and exploring those options. And I want to mention this because redevelopment potential is certainly an opportunity to increase density and diversity of housing types and to promote livability across our county. But it's also a threat. Can you see my cursor? Yes, you can. Excellent. This is the Canal District. So if you look at that neighborhood in particular, just as an example, the building values there are less than the value of the land because of the improvements that we're funding as residents, as our local governments are investing in that community. That's an example of a neighborhood that we need to pay attention to preserve what's there. So it's not just about looking at redevelopment potential to flip communities into higher density and to promote growth, but also to protect where growth is coming, to keep what we love about where we live. Another opportunity is looking at publicly owned lands, and I'm gonna, again, just tease you there. Okay, so one of the things that we really wanna understand about Chatham County and our region at large is how much housing capacity do we actually have today? Because we've talked a lot about zoning reform, and thank you to our panel for bringing that up. So what we did is look at today's existing zoning in the county and all of the municipalities and did a high level of assessment. We made some quick assumptions. If multifamily is permissible, given today's zoning, we assumed that developers would choose to build that, which is not always the case. We also try to maximize developable land, certainly taking into account our marsh buffers and river buffers and where our wetlands are, but really trying to push the envelope to see how much we could build. So that's what I'm kind of here to talk to you about today. So this is where our vacant residential parcels are in the county. So a lot of pressure, not surprisingly, in West Chatham, but there are some remaining, of course, vacant residential parcels throughout the county. If we build at the allowable densities based on today's zoning, here's what we'll get. And my commentary on this is it ain't enough. Even where multifamily zoning is allowed, we're only going to achieve in most of the county up to 2 dwelling units an acre. Those are half-acre lots, and y'all, that's just not sustainable. That's sprawl. Half-acre lots is, in fact, suburban-style sprawl. So if we build today, even where multifamily zoning is, we're going to achieve sprawl. And we're going to run out of green space. So this is, again, to keep in mind that number, somewhere between 14,000 and more than 36,000 housing units is a deficit. If we built out all of our developable land that's zoned residential today in Chatham County, we would achieve that bare minimum, yes, of 14,500 new units. And I didn't cook the books, those numbers just happened to be the same. But what would happen if we did that is that all residential land would be developed. By as early as 2035, all residential land will have been developed. And our housing mix will be majority single-family and two-family homes, even with the multifamily zoning that we have today. So to drive home the point of the panel, we need zoning reform, we need land use reform if we want to continue to grow and thrive as a community. And to pick on the city of Savannah a little bit, which is obviously our most urban area and has the most dense zoning allowed, the existing housing units mix today is primarily single family. At build out, that mix is going to remain fairly consistent. So even within the city of Savannah, we need to promote more density and diversity of housing types through zoning reform. What does that mean? By 2060, at the very latest, we'll be out of land if we don't rezone and if we don't plan for the growth that's already coming. Maybe even as early as 2035, which is only 10 years away, y'all. And if we don't plan for the growth that's coming, that growth is going to be incredibly expensive for us as taxpayers and business owners. Because right now, what we're zoned for is an incredibly inefficient development pattern with high infrastructure costs that's going to drive congestion, create loss of green space, and really not promote the quality of life that we all want to achieve. Not just for us, the people that live here today, but the people that are moving here. So what can we do about it? We've talked about density, of course, but to your point, and thank you, my fellow planner in the room, where matters and context matters. And we don't just need more housing, we need housing that's located near services, that's appropriate to the community where it's locating, and we need the community voices to shape those plans. So what we need is a plan for all of this growth, and not just housing, but also the infrastructure that's going to support that housing. What we're seeing in outlying areas in our region around the Hyundai plan is that we just don't have the water and sewer capacity to build more housing in our outlying counties, which is why we're seeing things like zoning moratoriums and just local governments saying, no, we can't have more housing yet because we're not ready. Well, we need a plan to get ready. And because our growth is regional and being driven by regional forces, our plans should be regional. We shouldn't continue to plan jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but have an overarching vision. And one of the big reasons why, I told you guys I was going to go fast, is that housing supports economic development. And we've been really fortunate in this region to have an incredible amount of economic development wins. But if we don't have the housing and infrastructure to support that job growth, then that job growth is not going to be sustainable, and workers are going to leave our region. So I want to, because we're in the middle of the legislative session, I also can't help myself. I have to mention that we've got about a month and a half left. There is a bill called the Choice Act that has dropped. It's HB 1266. That bill is something that we've been fighting for with the Georgia Planning Association for years. It provides state incentives to help local governments accommodate the growth that is coming through land use reform. Locally driven solutions so that the community has a voice in how they grow, but the state providing incentives, funding for those communities that adopt pro-housing policy. So if you're interested in that, please join the Housing Coalition. Please look up the Choice Act, HB 1266. Reach out to your elected officials at the state level and let them know that you, as a Chatham County resident or as a coastal Georgia resident, know that growth is coming and that you need help planning for that growth. The panel talked a lot about what kinds of housing strategies work, so I don't want to belabor that point, and I don't have a lot of time. But I did want to say a couple of things, and that is that without a plan, we may grow our housing supply in this community, but what we won't grow is our quality of life. We need housing that promotes thriving neighborhoods, that supports accessible neighborhood services through that density and diversity of housing type, but the mix of uses so that jobs are close to housing, so that people can get to where they need to be without having a 45-minute or a 2-hour commute, which is some of the what we're planning for right now, is Hyundai is going to be opening very soon next year. With that, again, I wanted to say, please join the Housing Coalition, reach out to me, and we'll get you plugged into that. Also, advocate for planning. We need a plan as we grow. And finally, remember that we're in the middle of the legislative session, and get involved not just at the local level, but at the state level, and help us promote pro-housing strategies, not just here in our region, but also across the state. How did I do? 10 minutes? Okay. She said I was right on time.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Whitney, giving us some context about why all we're discussing matters and how it's going to impact our county as a beginning point. Next, I'd like to introduce our keynote address. Our keynote speaker, Mr. Edward Erfurt, is the Director of Community Action at Strong Towns and has focused on the management, design, and successful implementation of development and place-making projects that enrich the tapestry of place.
Well, thank you. I am quite honored to be here today to share some ideas with you. Again, I'm Edward Erfurt. I give a really extensive bio as a tongue twister, so make this kind of like roll into these talks. I work for an organization called Strong Towns. It's part of a national movement where we are sharing ideas as an advocacy organization through media. Lots of the things I'm sharing here are on our website. We blog and share 2 to 3 articles a day about these types of issues. When we talk about housing in this country, we all can agree we're in a crisis. I don't think anybody here has any challenges to that idea. We see this in New Hampshire, in Florida, in California. We hear it in bank discussions. We hear it in all of our commission meetings. We hear it on Wall Street. We hear it from real estate agents. We hear it from folks that are trying to buy houses and folks that are trying to sell houses. And this idea out there is that Americans are conflicted about what they would like to see where home prices are going. When we do an analysis out there, almost equal parts want to see home prices increase. At the same time, they want to see them decrease. Same number want to see them decrease in America. That leads to a lot of fear. There are 2 conversations that we are having in this country today about housing. The first is an investment Wall Street discussion. The second is a housing discussion, and about getting people under roofs. About 50 years ago, 100 years ago, we did not have these discussions. We had abundant and affordable housing. Now, that housing was not that great, and we can see some remnants in communities all across the country with that. We've gotten better in how we build houses, making them safer and stronger. As we talk through this, when we talk through this Wall Street idea, we are talking, or when we talk about at a local level, we started this thing where we say we need housing prices to come down, right? We need the prices to come down so we can afford to get people into housing. At the same time, those of us that have houses, those that have invested in housing, say that that housing price cannot fall. This is a tug of war in the conversation with housing. And what I tell you is housing cannot be both. It cannot be broadly affordable, and it cannot be indefinitely appreciating as an investment. This is a really tough thing for folks to think through. So I welcome some challenges to that. I want to share an idea about traditional towns and the traditional development pattern. And I feel obligated, coming from Strong Towns, to share from where we're at in Brainerd, an example of Brainerd, Minnesota. I would not dare talk about Savannah and Savannah. I am nowhere near knowledgeable enough to do that, even though I have studied that as an architect and as an urbanist. But the traditional development pattern that we see in a town like Brainerd, Minnesota, that started out in the wilderness as a timber town, started with small buildings, small individual investments, small individual risks. These are small wooden buildings created out of the local materials. On this main street, we can see there's not a lot of outside investment here. These are individuals investing on this property. If the billiard hall fails, Brainerd does not collapse. There is not a market collapse with that. The billiard hall may switch over to a saloon. Or if it's really that bad, we'll take it apart, we'll disassemble it, we'll use the materials and build something else. This is a traditional pattern of where it starts, these small investments. As these investments play out over time, there's an accumulation of wealth on the ground through these experiments. This is the same street only 50 years later, where those small beds and wooden shacks have slowly grown up and out over time. Those temporary materials are more permanent with the introduction of brick and stone. These investments are reoccurring and building wealth in this community. Through that wealth, there's the opportunity to go and start to put in public infrastructure. We see roadways, the fire department starts, the police department starts. That billiard hall is no longer welcome in town because now we have law and order in the community. Another 50 years forward, as those investments accrue, those buildings now become wider. They start to bring in more individuals to that town. The accumulation of wealth, we can see all of these buildings are developing now into brick and stone. These buildings are remaining in these communities time and time again through history. There are examples like that here in Savannah that you all can point to that follow this. The thing to note about this development pattern is those previous two-story buildings are now one block out from this. Those previous one-story shacks, those experiments, are on the edge 3 blocks out from this. As the community doesn't densify, as it thickens, we see this pattern of natural development occurring. This accumulation of wealth allows the community to invest in public infrastructure and public services. When we talk about cities, cities are complex adaptive systems. I will relate them to a rainforest because a rainforest is a complex adaptive system. If a tree gets cut down in a rainforest or falls over or dies, the entire rainforest doesn't collapse. The undergrowth begins to fill in with new plants, and eventually a new tree will grow in that spot. This system is highly complex, but allows for adaptive change. We see that same pattern in traditional towns. This Ruth Goldberg system looks complex. It is not. It is complicated. We know what happens when you hit that bowling ball. But what happens here, if you look in the bottom, if you move that iron 2 or 3 inches in any direction, the system collapses. It will not work. This is similar to a washing machine. If a washing machine breaks, it's not going to become a toaster. It just collapses. When we talk about complex systems, the comparison of a complex rainforest is to that of a cornfield, which is complicated. I grew up in the Midwest, so I know a little bit about farming. And that farm field, it is highly regulated. The farmer is evaluating moisture, fertilization. It's all a single crop that has been genetically changed and altered so it is going to provide the most amount of corn in the shortest amount of time. However, if the fertilizer mix is off, if there's a shortage of water or there's a blight, you now have 1,000 acres that will die all at once. We create these complicated systems to provide order within our system. When we show this as a town, we see on my left, your right, the complex system, the traditional town. These are complex places, just as we look around the city here. In our modern development patterns, we try to simplify that so we can nationalize it, repeat it, and take the same ideas forward everywhere. If I look at the zoning code in Savannah, it is rooted in a zoning code from somewhere else, ultimately beginning in a zoning code in New York City. We have tried to do this, and we create a complicated system that is highly fragile. I want to talk about, as we go through housing, the complicated responses in this country that we have applied to housing. Housing has a lot to do with our federal interest rates. Our federal treasury, when we look at interest rates, they respond to crisis in the same way. It's repeatable. We know exactly what they're going to do. When this country has had a crisis, whether it's savings and loan, the dot-com bubble, or the financial crisis of 2008, we lowered the interest rates. Frankly, I think if a pipe broke, if there's a water line break at the Treasury Department, they probably would lower interest rates again to solve the pipe break problem. But what is happening here, where we're at historic lows of these interest rates, where money is almost free to borrow, this helps the large players in the game. This begins to hurt our most local economies. And I could show you this through the Case-Shiller Index on home prices. We can see here, starting back in 1945, where house prices are within the United States. Those bubbles, the bumps you see, are moments in time where the federal government lowered interest rates. The bubble that's up here is 2008 or 2004, just before the crash. All the way on the far right is where we are today. Nobody's saying we're in a bubble. When we look at those interest rates and how they're impacting home prices, what this is showing us is that at a national level, we are putting billions and trillions of dollars into the system. And what is the result? Not lower home prices. These federal responses, these very complicated responses, are resulting in things that are out of our control. They're resulting in unintended consequences and create enormous challenges for us. We need to know who benefits from this to help begin to talk about responses to housing. Any ideas who would benefit from high house prices? Homeowners? Your local and state, federal governments, right? House prices are high, more taxes. You've noticed that a lot of communities where I'm at, we've not had to raise taxes because there's more money coming in. Existing homeowners, if you have a house, of course, you're benefiting from that. You get excited when a house in the neighborhood sells for a higher price because, wow, pat on the back, I've got more equity out there. Banks and insurance companies, same interest rates, but bigger loans. They're getting from that. Insurance companies, bigger insurance policies. Developers and contractors, they're benefiting from this because they can make a lot of mistakes if the prices continue to go up, right? They can lose some money along the way because at the end of the day, those mistakes are made up by those prices. The land speculators, there's no question there. Realtors, even the pension funds. The investments that we have for retirement are embedded in this system, and they want to see those succeed. And I think I've heard it this morning about who doesn't benefit from this. It's clearly the renters and the poor. This is a system that we have set up, a complicated system. So what is the goal? These are two really, really important questions, and I want to go through these because I've heard both of them this morning. Question one is, how do we create affordable housing in our community? And question two is, how do we make housing affordable in our community? And what I'm going to tell you is that these are not the same question. These have remotely different responses and solutions. Question two, we have almost zero control over. These are things at a level way above us here at a local level. Maybe we can push the interest rates a little bit, Maybe we can work on the financial systems where people are investing, but this is so far out of our control. We could go out there and say, how do we make housing affordable? We can't control that. But question one, we can. How do we create affordable housing in our community? And I started to hear some of those today, and after this talk, we're going to talk through that in groups about that. That is something we can do at a local level to create more abundant housing within our community at more affordable houses at rates and in a replicable way that we could repeat again and again. We've had everyone represented here from all of the structures of government, so the basic civics course here is we are all familiar with the levels of government, federal, state, and local. We have high esteem for the federal government from our civics class, right? It's the highest level of government. They've got all this power. They have an army. They can print money. I've worked in local government for over 15 years. That's the lowest level. That's the one that's on the streets. Those are the ones that have to do hard work. We would describe that at Strong Towns, that local government is somewhat described in this as the algae of government. You know, you have to do all the hard work without all the tools. But what I will tell you is that local government, that is where the highest level of collaboration is everywhere across America. It is the government closest to the people that are representing you are your neighbors, they're the people you go to church with, they're the people that you see in your community. At a local level, we have learned how to deal with immediate needs. A pipe breaks at midnight, city services are out there immediately to do that, no questions. They're not waiting for a federal grant. They're not waiting for a new legislative session to occur to know what to do. They know how to do it. They do it with the resources that they have available at the time. It may not be pretty, it may not be perfect, but they're addressing that need. If I take that and explain that as a business model approach, this is a horizontal approach for management and doing business. This is where we identify a local need and we immediately do the next smallest thing with the resources available. It's not the end game, it's not the final piece, but this is what we're doing immediately in town to deal with these pieces. I've talked a lot about housing. I want to slip in a little bit of transportation here to kind of change it up a bit. At Strong Towns, we have members all across North America doing amazing things. This is Portland, Oregon. This is where there was a street where the residents wanted to cross the street and it was a state highway. And I'm sure your state highway department, when you ask them, hey, can we put in a crosswalk, they probably jump up right away, just like everybody else, and want to go out and help. This is a common piece. This is a vertical approach. When we ask them to do that, we've got to go through 12 different pieces of paper and tests and studies, and then they tell us, well, don't worry about it. It's in the books to look at 5 years from now, and we're going to do it. In this community, a couple of residents said, look, let's go out on a Saturday and let's use some chalk paint and some cones, put a crosswalk in and see what happens. They identified a local struggle. They took action with the materials they had. These are the cones they used for soccer practice. This is the paint they went and bought at Home Depot. This is not like over rocket science. Part of their group was somebody that was an engineer, so they could say, yeah, you know, the stripes need to be this big. They spent 80 minutes setting this up. They sat there for the day talking about it. At the end of the day, they took the cones away and they just waited for the rain to wash away the paint. This is something people took at a local level to take action in their community. They kind of asked for permission, but they knew nobody was going to come out there to stop them. We call this the public investment process. And there's 4 steps. These are really, really simple steps, but it is, when I work with communities, I find that they get stuck with this. And I hope today we work through these, and I'm happy to talk through this with anybody at any time. When we talk about these struggles, we should humbly observe where people are struggling in our community. Let's identify it, talk about it, let's put that out there. Second, we need to question what is the next smallest thing we could do right now to address that struggle. Not somebody else, not your neighbor, you. If you're in a city department, what could you do within your department? If you're in a community group, what could you do in a community group? If you're a pastor at a congregation, what could you and your congregation do immediately to address that struggle? And at Strong Towns, what I would tell you then is that we want to encourage you to do that and do that right now. If I hear about this stuff, I want to elevate it because this is incredible work that happens. Once that happens, document it and repeat. Start the process over again. This process is small steps where it is okay to fail. The private sector does this all the time, and they learn from those failures. But what I can tell you is that by doing this, we can advance and make incredible change within our community. So we need to ask ourselves back to that question, how do we create affordable housing in our community? How do we do that here in Chatham County and in Savannah? The thing that we tell folks time and time again, that we share, that we see where successful cities are occurring, is by allowing the next increment by right. What is the next smallest phase of development in your community that you could do by right? Meaning, I could do it by getting a building permit, walking into the building department this morning, and this afternoon starting construction. What is that amount? Could I go and get that next increment in that neighborhood, going from a single family to a duplex, adding an additional unit in my house? What is the next increment? Every community is different of what that next increment is, but we should be doing that and allowing that by right to incrementally develop our communities. And when I say that calibration at a local level, the first thing is that no neighborhood should experience radical change. And you all will point to many, many places in your community where radical change has happened. And that's not what we're talking about at Strong Towns or we would be advocating for. But we also have to recognize that no neighborhood should be exempt from change. Our neighborhoods are not under glass, they're not locked in amber. Historically, they have changed over time. You can see thousands of communities across America where this has occurred. We have forgotten this because we are dealing with a development pattern where we're building everything in a finalized end state. We also need to lower the bar of entry so that people have the opportunity to become part of the market. We need to allow folks to go out and do things, not lowering the standards, but lowering the opportunity mark to get into the game. In Oswego, New York, an area that was financially distressed, the declining population, they had a bank run on confidence. And everywhere I'm at, there are communities like this, even the fanciest communities in this country are dealing with neighborhoods and blocks where confidence is left and markets are going away. At Oswego, New York, they did not have the big dollars to go out to go and do revitalization. When they wanted to deal with affordable housing, they were lucky to get enough money to do one house in 1 year. That has almost zero impact in that community. Yes, it got one house. Yes, it got one family in there, but there's still 50 others that need help. They had vacant and dilapidated properties that nobody wanted to invest in because they lost confidence. They set up a small $60,000 grant. They said on a street, 7 out of 10 folks on that street need to participate in a beautification grant, meaning they would help fund dollar for dollar up to $10,000 to do exterior improvements to a property. Now, you could do a $50,000 renovation of a porch, or you could do a $100 landscaping project in your yard. But 7 out of 10 neighbors on the street had to do this. That first year, $60,000 led to $750,000 of private investment back in the community. 7 years later, almost every street in Oswego, New York, is participated in this program, and they have built confidence up getting vacant houses occupied. They're doing block by block, one step at a time, and it is a competitive process. We also need to look at what is available for us today at a bar of entry. We have a problem in this country with an aging population where they are stuck in a house that is paid for, that if they sold, they couldn't get something smaller. They have maintenance obligations coming up, roofs have to be fixed, air conditioning units break. AARP will tell us that there's a loneliness epidemic in this country, where their members have exceedingly said time and time again that they are lonely in the places they're at because their family has moved out, but they want to stay within their communities. In these types of rooms, this is an opportunity to go and look at accessory apartments, allowing people to move in. This is something we used to do all the time. We called them boarding houses. You put a little card in the window and say for rent. This is an opportunity here where now you can cohabitate. And this isn't new. We've been watching this real life work out for the last 40 years. There's also the next increment is backyard cottages. We might call this ADUs. I think that's a bit of a derogatory name because these are people's houses, not an accessory to something. And a backyard cottage is really cute. Out in Texas, they tell us casitas is what they use, the same terminology. There's better terminology. Don't let the planners ruin it for everybody. I'm an architect. Let's get some nice stuff here. But these backyard cottages, allowing these by right in a community, whether attached or detached, this is an opportunity. There have been changes in the markets that allow for more loans for this. This is something simple that somebody can do on a property. Windsor, Ontario looked at this idea. They had a really, really bad zoning code. I think lots of communities can relate to clunky, complicated codes. They actually went through this group called ADU Search. They went and did a mapping exercise to look at how many of the units in their town with their clunky code could they get accessory dwelling units in. How many backyard cottages, how many small apartments in a building could they get? And they were thinking, a dozen. They have 70,000 properties in Windsor, Canada. Almost 20,000 by right could go and get a backyard unit, detached. Almost 40,000 were suitable for a unit to be within an existing house. So we talk about density, it's not an expansion, it's thickening up a community. Sarah Kupner, who is the one that did this study, was so moved by it, she built her own. This is somebody that is probably in your community today, they just don't know they can do it. In California, they made it by right at a state level. That started back in 2013. You could see there's this flat line, the rules allowed it, but nobody knew how to do it. What they found, it was a financing issue. They didn't have the finance tools in place in California to support people building accessory units. When they figured out the financing, look what happened. Now in California, it's like going out on a weekend and buying a car. You can go and figure out how to do an accessory unit. You can pick it out. Do you want it to be 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom? Is it going to fit on your lot? Do you want it modern, traditional? And it's all packaged up and ready to go. These are homes for people in a state that has a housing crisis that dwarfs the things you're talking about here. There's also this thing out there, this idea of tiny houses. Everybody talks about their TV shows on it, it's cutesy. My parents, my grandparents, they called this a starter home. These are the 500, 600 square foot units. These are things that my grandparents built with cash. I can't tell you that lumber is going to be cheaper, but I could show you how to build a roof that can fit a family with less lumber. I don't know if it's true here, but in a lot of communities, that size unit is not permitted. Lowering the bar of entry is doing something as simple as allowing this to be built. And we could put it in the right place on the lot. The planners can help us to do that. But this is a low bar of entry for folks to come in and work. As we dial into all of those ideas and the things that other communities are doing, I want to bring everybody's attention to what we call the bigness bias. So when we look at developments, when we talk about a bigger development, it's a large project. It's got regulatory costs, financing costs, and development costs. And we expect those to be big for a big project. We want to do a small project. We want to do that starter home, that cottage, the accessory unit, the backyard dwelling. It's a small project, it's less money. But when we look at the per unit capital for that, of where that is at, this flips. The regulatory cost per unit for a 200-unit apartment complex or a 300-unit residential subdivision, we can spread all of those costs out over all those units. So the regulatory costs, yeah, we made them do all the studies, we made them do all the analyses that's there, we can see where the financing pieces are. On a small project, and in many, many communities, the large project application is the same as the small project application. That's an enormous burden on somebody trying to get into the game, trying to address a housing need in your community. How can we be smarter in that regulatory cost? When we talk about the financing costs, what are the things we could do to help lower those financing costs? Are there ways where not-for-profits and philanthropists could come in to back mortgages and loans for those developments? Could we do that locally where they back that up? The likelihood of failure is very little. If it does, that fund gets it and they'll go and auction it off and sell it, and there's such a need in this market, it would continue. That's not money going out. That's money ensuring a vision you have for this community. So we need to think about fixing those finances for those small developers. Where are the areas not getting necessarily money for a down payment, but how do we get those loans back into the community where we are insuring those and backing those as a community within the community funds we have? There are also communities around the country that are going and exploring pre-approved building plans. What I can tell you this tells the development community is that you are ready for housing. The key to this program, so this is an idea where you have architects design beautiful homes that meet the requirements for your community. It goes through City Hall without a builder. That process gets a building plan that's been approved by fire, by zoning, by the building department, by utilities. It's all set to go, so somebody could come into City Hall like they would go to McDonald's and pick a 1, 2, or 3, pay for the building permit fee, and then that afternoon go out and build. It takes the brain damage out of the process. It's already been approved, so you only have to do it once. The other thing that happens with this, and I could tell you, speaking to the folks in local government, is it aligns City Hall behind the idea of development. It creates City Hall as a developer because your city staff are now working towards a goal of predictability with it. And from a management side, imagine all the time that your staff isn't wasting spinning their wheels doing 100 of these. They do one, we can sell 100 plans out there. In Groveland, Florida, they did this, they set it out there. This was done where an architect did it on the outside, so it was almost $0 for the city to do. They found that they weren't moving out as fast as they thought they would. They found the financing was a struggle. In Groveland, you can walk in the morning and pick out a house plan. They give you a sheet of paper saying you're approved with a photocopy of what the plan would look like. So you could go to the bank and get a loan. So the bank says, oh my gosh, we know this is a good investment. We know they've already been approved. We know they don't have to wait 6 or 8 weeks to go through this process. And then you come in and pay your building permit fees. Groveland didn't care when they got the fees. They just wanted it before you started. We have to cultivate 1,000 developers. We've got to cultivate developers here. And they're not the big names coming out of Atlanta. These are folks already in your community. The Incremental Development Alliance is an incredible organization with an objective of getting 1,000 small developers out in the communities across North America. We have to train folks in how to do this. We have to train new developers. There's a group out of Incremental Development Alliance called Neighborhood Evolution. They have a 12-step program. They're going into communities training folks. They're doing this right now in South Bend, Indiana. Again, declining population, and if it wasn't for the university being there, the town would probably have boarded up many, many years ago. They're working with 12 people at a time. Over the last 5 years, this has led to $23 million worth of new investment in the city of South Bend. That translates to $650,000 a year in additional tax revenue to the city. There are people that started conversations on their front porches in their living room. Mike Keene is a PhD faculty professor. He's one of the leading developers in this town. Barbara Turner does not want to be called a developer for all the reasons we talked about why people don't like developers. But she wanted to invest in her community. She wanted to provide an opportunity for her grandchildren to live in her neighborhood. She became an incremental developer by default because she made an investment in her property to build a house for her grandchildren to move into. And it has inspired others in her community to do the same. So that $23 million of investment is not out-of-towners. It's everyday folks in the community building a consortium on the ground in the community moving forward. This is where we see the future to address and respond to this incredible housing struggle. Because the heroes that we need are already within our community today. We need to lower the bar of entry for them. We need to provide the education and leadership with them. And when they get stuck with codes, with financing, talking to the banks, there are people in this room today that can get to the table with them to guide them through. And I would encourage that to occur. I really want to thank you. I hope this inspires you to move forward. And in our discussions later today, I can be reached anytime at strongtowns.org. But I really want to thank everybody for inviting us to share some of this. And I hope this inspires you to take action here in the community to really do incredible, great work.
Thank you, Edward. That was amazing, right? So my name is Christian Shellman, Community Development Manager for Housing Savannah, and it's been an incredible morning, and I'm so happy to be with you all today. So some quick housekeeping items. So we have some amazing students from Georgia Southern. Give them a quick wave, y'all. They are conducting a survey that's going to help us identify and address our housing challenges in our community. And they have some takeaways with some QR codes, so take one, do it later, but please go over to their table. So as we transition into the second half of our day, I'm thrilled to introduce you to the 5 working groups that will be tackling some of the most pressing issues in affordable housing. These working groups have been carefully crafted to address different aspects of our community housing challenges, and they are Affordable Housing 101, Countywide Livable Plan, Housing Choice, Housing Stability, and Transportation and Infrastructure. The purpose of these groups goes beyond just identifying barriers. We are here to roll up our sleeves and take concrete action steps to solve them. It's important to note that these working groups were identified as priorities in the Housing Savannah Action Plan. With a lot of help from our host committee and the Chatham County Housing Coalition, we formed these working groups to ensure we address the most critical issues facing our community. So a little context, Affordable Housing 101, this group will dive deep into the fundamentals of affordable housing and debunk some myths surrounding affordable housing. Countywide Livable Plan, we will discuss how to create a comprehensive plan that ensures every community within the county is livable and inclusive. Housing Choice. This group will explore ways to expand housing options, utilizing innovative approaches to meet the diverse needs of our community. Housing Stability. This group will focus on strategies to provide housing, the benefits of safe and stable, healthy housing.
transportation and infrastructure, which is over here. No, over here. We'll talk about the access to reliable transportation and essential infrastructure to support a vital community. The work product from these working groups will be followed up on because we are not just identifying issues today, we are solving them. If you take a look around the room, you'll see some discussion points posted on the walls. These are meant to guide our conversations and help focus our efforts on finding meaningful solutions. Totally up to you to choose 2 working groups to give your thoughts on. We have some incredible facilitators that are ready to create a space for meaningful and important dialogue. So we're getting lunch ready, so you're gonna grab your lunch, and the first session will run from 12:15 to 1:15, and then we'll have a quick break, and then we'll switch the final session, 1:30 to 2:30. Afterward, we'll reconvene to do a quick recap, reflecting on the progress made and the ideas shared throughout the day. On your tables, there are some sticky notes in case you don't get to say something but want it documented. Each of these working groups plays a crucial role in our collective efforts to address the housing challenges facing our community. By coming together, sharing our expertise, and committing to action, I am confident that we can make a significant progress toward ensuring that everyone in our community has a safe, affordable place to call home, because there is no place like home, right? Thank y'all. We're gonna get lunch ready, take a quick break, and find your sessions.